In December of 1883, I made the worst decision of my life. At least that's what I thought at the time. I saved a woman nobody wanted. Turned out, she was the one who saved me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that cold afternoon in the Wyoming Territory to a ranch called Iron Creek, where the wind howled down from the Bighorn Mountains and a man could go weeks without seeing another soul. My name is Jacob Stedman. Most folks call me Jake. I was 33 years old that winter, though I felt ancient. 2 years earlier, I'd buried my wife Margaret in the small cemetery outside town. Pneumonia took her in the spring of 1881, and I hadn't spoken more than 10 words a day to anyone since. The ranch sat 40 miles east of what would someday become Yellowstone, 800 acres of stubborn Wyoming earth that fought you for every blade of grass. I ran 200 head of cattle, fixed my own fences, and preferred the company of my horse to most people. The ranch house was solid built from logs I'd cut myself, with a stone fireplace that could throw heat into every corner when the temperature dropped below zero, which it did, often. That particular December afternoon, I was mending the gate to the main corral. The wood had cracked in the last freeze, and if I didn't fix it before the next storm, I'd spend a week chasing cattle across the territory. My hands were raw from the cold, but I'd learned long ago that ranch work didn't pause for comfort. The sun was already thinking about painting the snow-covered peaks orange and gold when I heard it. The rattle of a wagon coming up the long trail from the valley. I straightened, squinting into the distance. Visitors were rare out here. Most people had better sense than to travel this far from town in winter. As the wagon got closer, I recognized the driver, Victor Whitehorse. My jaw tightened. Victor was a fur trader who spent more time in saloons than trap lines. 3 years back, he'd bought a load of pelts from me on credit, never paid. Now here he was, bold as brass, driving up to my ranch like we were old friends. The wagon was a sorry sight. The horse looked half-starved, ribs showing through its winter coat. The boards of the wagon bed were splitting, held together more by habit than nails. Victor himself looked worse than I remembered. His face was red and bloated, his eyes bloodshot. He'd been drinking. Even from 20 feet away, I could smell the whiskey. He pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down, nearly falling in the process. A wide, gap-toothed smile split his face. Jake Stedman. His voice was too loud, slurred at the edges. I brought what you need, my friend, a woman to help with the ranch. I set down my hammer slowly. I need a ranch hand, Victor. Someone who can mend fence and haul water, not a housekeeper. Better than a ranch hand. He gestured wildly toward the wagon. She cooks, she sews, she works hard. That's when I saw her. A figure sat in the back of the wagon wrapped in a threadbare blanket. As I watched, she stood up slowly, carefully. A young woman, small, maybe 5'4", dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, skin the color of creek sand in summer. Her eyes met mine, and I saw something in them that made my chest tighten. Not fear exactly, more like resignation, like she'd already accepted whatever was about to happen. She wore a traditional Shoshone skirt and a torn calico blouse that had seen better days. Her moccasins were worn thin, but it was the way she moved that stopped me cold. When she put weight on her right leg, her whole body tilted. She gripped the side of the wagon, knuckles white, and I saw the wince cross her face before she could hide it. Her right leg couldn't bear her weight properly. She was crippled. Something cold and hard settled in my gut. She's injured. Not injured, Victor protested, waving his hand dismissively. Just an old break, from when she was young. Doesn't slow her down much. Much? I repeated the word flatly. Victor, I need someone who can walk a trap line in 2 feet of snow. I need someone who can help round up cattle. You brought me someone who can barely stand. The woman's eyes dropped to the ground. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. I wondered if she spoke English. Victor's smile faltered. He took a step toward me, his voice dropping to something that tried to sound reasonable. "Look, Jake, you remember that debt $200 for the pelts I bought? I remember you never paid. Well, here's the payment." He gestured at the woman, my sister. "She's learned English. She knows how to cook. She'll keep house mend. Your clothes keep you company through the winter. That clears the debt." I stared at him. "You're trying to sell me your sister." "Not selling, trading. It's different." "It's not different." Victor's face darkened. The false friendliness dropped away like a mask. "I don't have your money, Stedman. I'm leaving for California tonight. The wagon's packed light. I can't take her with me. She's your problem now." He turned and started climbing back onto the wagon seat. I took 3 quick steps forward, my hand moving toward the rifle, leaning against the fence post. "Victor!" The woman's voice cut through the air. It was the first sound she'd made. The word was in English but raw with emotion, desperation, betrayal, something that went deeper than words. Victor didn't look back. He cracked the whip over the half-starved horse's head. The animal bolted forward, nearly overturning the wagon as it turned in a tight, reckless arc. Within seconds, they were racing back down the trail toward the valley, the wagon bouncing dangerously over the frozen ruts. "Victor!" She screamed it this time, her voice raw with betrayal and desperation. But the wagon was already disappearing into the tree line. The sound of the wheels faded, replaced by the endless whistle of the wind. I stood there, my hand still outstretched toward where my rifle leaned. Slowly, I lowered my arm. The woman remained standing in the snow where she'd climbed down, or maybe fallen from the wagon. A small cloth bundle lay at her feet. Everything she owned, probably. She was shivering, not just from the cold, though the temperature was dropping fast as the sun sank. This was the shaking that came from shock from the body, realizing it had just been abandoned in the middle of nowhere. I studied her in the fading light. She couldn't have been more than 25. Her face was angular with high cheekbones and a strong jaw. Her eyes, when she finally looked up at me again, were the color of honey held up to sunlight. Amber shot through with gold. "Do you speak English?" I asked. She nodded once. "Some." Her voice was quiet but steady, no tears. That surprised me. Most women in her situation would be crying. Then again, most women probably wouldn't be standing straight-backed and proud after being sold like livestock. "What's your name?" "Naomi Whitehorse." "You're Shoshone." Another nod. "My mother was Shoshone. My father was Mexican. He died when I was young." I let out a long breath through my nose. This was a mess, a complicated, impossible mess. I looked at the sky. The clouds were thickening over the peaks, turning the purple gray of a fresh bruise. Another storm was building, a big one from the look of it. I couldn't leave a dog outside in what was coming, let alone a person, no matter how useless she might be to me. "Get inside." I pointed toward the cabin. "But don't get comfortable. First break in the weather, you're walking down to Fort Grant. There's a marshal there. He can figure out what to do with you." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she bent carefully, favoring her bad leg, and picked up her bundle. She limped toward the cabin door, each step clearly painful. But she didn't ask for help, didn't complain, just moved forward with grim determination. I watched her go, that sinking feeling in my gut getting heavier. I'd wanted help with the ranch, someone strong enough to survive a Wyoming winter. Instead, I'd been saddled with a crippled woman who'd be lucky to make it through a single blizzard. I didn't know it then, but that crippled woman would save my life before winter's end. And in the process, she'd teach me that strength had nothing to do with perfect legs or unbroken bodies. But that came later. Right now, all I knew was that my simple, solitary life had just gotten infinitely more complicated. The inside of my cabin was warm, heated by the stone fireplace that dominated the north wall. I'd built the place with my own hands 6 years earlier when Margaret and I first claimed this land. It was simple. One large main room with the fireplace, a kitchen area on one side, my bed frame on the other, a table I'd hewn from pine, 2 chairs, a few shelves for supplies. Margaret's presence was still there, though I never talked about her. Her sewing basket sat in the corner untouched. A sampler she'd embroidered hung on the wall near the window. In the picture frame on the mantel, though, I'd turned it face down months ago. Naomi stood just inside the door looking around carefully. She didn't touch anything, just took it all in with those watchful amber eyes. I realized she was assessing, looking for threats, for escape routes, for anything that might tell her what kind of man she'd been left with. Smart. I moved past her to the kitchen area and poured water from the pitcher into a basin. "You can wash up here." I set a clean cloth beside it. "I'll make something to eat." She moved to the basin slowly. Her limp was more pronounced now that I could see it up close. The right leg seemed shorter than the left, or maybe the ankle didn't bend properly. Whatever injury she'd suffered as a child, it had healed wrong. I'd seen something similar once in a horse I'd bought cheap at auction. The mare had broken her foreleg as a filly, and it had set crooked. She limped for the rest of her life. But she was also the smartest, most sure-footed horse I'd ever owned. Learned to compensate, learned to be careful, ended up more valuable than horses with 4 good legs. I pushed the thought away. This wasn't a horse. This was a person whose brother had just sold her to settle a debt. I ladled stew into 2 wooden bowls. I wasn't much of a cook. The stew was mostly beans and a little dried beef, under-seasoned and slightly burned on the bottom. Margaret used to joke that I could burn water if left unsupervised. Naomi washed her face and hands in silence, then moved to the table when I gestured to a chair. She sat carefully, keeping weight off her bad leg. When I set the bowl in front of her, she looked at it for a moment, then up at me. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. This is charity, nothing more. Come spring, you're leaving." She picked up the spoon. "I understand." We ate in silence. The only sounds were the scrape of spoons on wood and the wind beginning to howl outside. The storm I'd sensed was arriving faster than I'd expected. Through the window I could see snow starting to fall, big, heavy flakes that meant business. I watched her from under my brows. She ate delicately, despite looking like she hadn't seen a full meal in weeks. Small bites, no hurry, like someone who'd learned to make food last. After a few minutes, I couldn't help myself. "Your leg. What happened?" She paused, spoon halfway to her mouth. "A horse? When I was 12, my mother's horse got spooked during a storm. Kicked me. The bone shattered. Why didn't someone set it properly? The reservation doctor did his best, but he had no supplies, no proper tools." She said it matter-of-factly without self-pity. "It healed crooked. Your brother didn't take you to a real doctor." Something flickered across her face. Anger, maybe, or old pain. "Victor spent money on whiskey, not doctors." I grunted. I'd figured as much. The West was full of men like Victor Whitehorse, men who saw people as things to be used, traded, discarded when convenient. The wind slammed against the cabin walls, making them creak. Snow was falling harder now, visible in the lamplight through the window. This storm was going to be bad. "You realize what this means," I said, leaning back in my chair. "That storm out there, the pass will be closed by morning. You're stuck here." She looked toward the window, then back at me. Her expression didn't change. "I know. For weeks. Maybe months if this winter is as hard as I think it'll be. I know. I'm not a kind man, Miss Whitehorse. I don't make conversation. I don't celebrate holidays. I work from sunup to sundown, and I expect anyone living under my roof to do the same. I can work. With that leg," her jaw tightened. "Yes, with this leg. I can sew, I can cook. I can mend tools and cure leather. I can do many things white men don't think Indians can do." There was steel in her voice now, pride. I'd hit a nerve. "I didn't mean to insult you." "Yes, you did." She met my eyes directly. "You think I'm useless, broken, a burden. I've heard it my whole life, from the reservation agent, from townspeople, from Victor, from everyone who looks at me." The truth of her words sat heavy between us. I had thought exactly that. Hell, I'd said it out loud not 30 minutes ago. "You're right," I admitted. "I did think that. "I apologize." She blinked, clearly surprised. Probably the first time a white man had apologized to her for anything. A long silence stretched out. Outside, the storm was reaching full strength. The temperature was dropping fast. I could feel it through the walls. Finally, Naomi spoke again, her voice quieter. "Where will I sleep?" I gestured to the bed in the corner. "There. I'll take the floor by the fire. That's your bed. And you're a guest. Even an unwanted one deserves basic decency." She looked at the bed, then at me, then down at her bowl. When she spoke again, her voice was so soft I almost didn't hear it. "Thank you, Mr. Stedman, for not throwing me out into the snow, for feeding me, for treating me like a person." Something twisted in my chest. How low had her expectations fallen that basic human decency surprised her. "You're welcome, but come spring this arrangement ends. Understood?" "Understood." She finished her stew in silence. Then she carried her bowl to the wash basin, cleaned it carefully, and limped toward the bed. She sat on the edge, removed her worn moccasins, and lay down fully clothed on top of the blankets. Within minutes, exhaustion claimed her. Her breathing evened out into sleep. I sat by the fire staring into the flames. The storm raged outside, piling snow against the walls. I'd promised Margaret in her last days that I wouldn't spend the rest of my life alone, that I'd find a way to live again, not just survive. But this wasn't what I'd had in mind. I looked at the sleeping woman across the room, Naomi Whitehorse, crippled, abandoned, probably terrified despite her brave face. Everything I didn't want or need. The wind howled like wolves at the door. Snow was already piling up against the windows. This storm was going to be worse than I thought, much worse. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, Victor Whitehorse had actually done me a favor. I ignored that voice, pushed it down, focused instead on banking the fire for the night and spreading my bedroll on the floor. Come spring, she'd be gone. That was the deal. That was the plan. I just had to survive one winter with an unwanted guest. How hard could it be? As it turned out, harder than I ever imagined, and not in the ways I expected. But that's a story for tomorrow. I woke to the smell of coffee. Real coffee, not the burnt, bitter mess I usually made. The aroma filled the cabin, rich and inviting. For a moment, still half asleep, I thought Margaret was back, that the last 2 years had been nothing but a nightmare. Then reality crashed down, and I opened my eyes to see Naomi Whitehorse standing at my stove. She moved carefully, favoring her good leg, but her hands were quick and sure. She'd found my coffee tin, my pot, and somehow made something that actually smelled drinkable. Steam rose from 2 cups on the table. Outside, the world was white. The storm had blown through in the night, leaving behind 3 feet of fresh snow. Drifts were piled against the cabin walls, some reaching halfway up the windows. The temperature had dropped so low I could see my breath inside the cabin, even with the fire going. "Good morning, Mr. Stedman." Naomi's voice was quiet, respectful. "I hope you don't mind. I made coffee." I sat up, my back stiff from sleeping on the floor. "I don't mind, though I'm surprised you found everything in the dark. I woke early, couldn't sleep." She limped to the table with both cups set, one in front of the chair I'd used last night. "I hope it's not too strong." I took a sip. It was perfect. Better than anything I'd managed in months. "It's good, thank you." She nodded and retreated to her own chair, wrapping both hands around her cup like it was precious. In the morning light streaming through the snow-covered windows, I could see her more clearly. She was younger than I'd first thought, maybe 24 or 25. Her dark hair was still in that simple braid, but a few strands had escaped during the night, softening her face. "The storm was bad," she said, looking toward the window. "More snow coming today, maybe tomorrow too." "How do you know?" "The sky, the color of the clouds, the way the wind sounds." She glanced at me. "My grandfather taught me to read weather. He said the mountains speak to those who listen." I studied her over the rim of my cup. "Your grandfather, he's Shoshone." "Yes, Running Deer. He's a tribal elder. Lives on the reservation near Fort Washakie now. Something sad crossed her face. I haven't seen him in 3 years. Victor wouldn't take me. Why not? He was ashamed of me. Said I embarrassed him. A crippled half-breed sister didn't help his reputation. The bitterness in her voice was barely contained. I wanted to say something to offer some kind of comfort, but I'd spent 2 years avoiding emotional conversations. The words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just nodded. We finished our coffee in silence. Then I stood, pulled on my heavy coat, and grabbed my work gloves. I need to check the livestock, make sure the cattle made it through the night. I'll come with you. I turned to look at her. The snow is 3 feet deep. I can walk in snow, not with that leg. You'll sink. You'll slow me down. Her jaw tightened in that way I was starting to recognize, stubborn pride rising up. Then I'll wait here and prepare food. You'll be hungry when you return. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. She'd already decided she was going to be useful, whether I wanted her help or not. Fine. There's dried meat in the cold box. Flour and beans in the pantry. Don't burn the cabin down. The ghost of a smile touched her lips. I'll try not to. The cold hit me like a physical blow when I stepped outside. 20 below, maybe colder. My breath froze in my beard immediately. The world was transformed. Every fence post wore a white cap. The corral was buried. Only the barn roof was visible, a dark triangle against the endless white. It took me 2 hours to dig my way to the livestock shelter, check on the cattle, and break the ice in their water trough. 2 hours of back-breaking work and cold so intense it hurt to breathe. But all the animals had survived. That was something. When I finally made it back to the cabin, stamping snow off my boots on the porch, I could smell something incredible. Bread, fresh bread. I opened the door to find Naomi pulling a Dutch oven from the coals. Inside were 3 perfect rounds of bread, golden brown and steaming. She'd also made a pot of stew, but this one actually had vegetables in it. Carrots I'd forgotten I had. An onion, some kind of herb that made the whole cabin smell like a feast. "Where did you find all this?" I asked, shrugging out of my coat. "Your pantry is disorganized. Things hidden in back. I cleaned while you were gone." She gestured to the shelves, which I now noticed were neatly arranged. "You had more supplies than you knew." I looked around the cabin. It wasn't just the pantry. She'd swept the floor, folded the blankets, even straightened the few books I owned on their shelf. The place looked more like a home than it had since Margaret died. "You didn't have to do all this." "I told you I could work." She set a bowl of stew and a chunk of fresh bread in front of me. "I pay my way." The stew was incredible. Thick and rich, the vegetables perfectly tender, the meat, seasoned with that herb I couldn't identify. The bread was even better, crusty on the outside and soft within. I ate 3 helpings before I realized I was making a fool of myself. Naomi watched me eat with something like satisfaction in her eyes. "It's good. It's the best meal I've had in 2 years. Your wife. She was a good cook." The question caught me off guard. I swallowed hard. Yes, she was. "I'm sorry for your loss. It was a long time ago. 2 years isn't long when you love someone." She said it with such certainty I looked up at her sharply. "My mother died when I was 15. 10 years later, I still miss her, every day." We sat in silence for a moment. Then, without quite meaning to, I asked, "What was she like?" "Your mother." Naomi's face softened. "Strong, kind. She could heal anything. Broken bones, fevers, snake bites. People came from miles away when they were sick. She taught me everything she knew about medicine plants." "Is that where you learned about herbs that smell in the stew? Sage and juniper. They grow near the creek even in winter. You have to know where to look." She paused. "If you want, I can show you. There are many useful plants white people walk past every day." I found myself nodding. I'd like that. Her smile was small but genuine. It changed her whole face, made her look younger, less guarded. For the first time I saw what she must have been like before life beat the joy out of her. The afternoon passed quietly. The snow continued to fall, lighter now but steady. Naomi mended a shirt I'd torn on barbed wire weeks ago and had been too lazy to fix. Her stitches were small and even nearly invisible. While she worked, I carved new handles for tools that had broken during fall. It was comfortable, easy, the kind of companionable silence I'd had with Margaret. That realization unsettled me. I wasn't supposed to be comfortable with this woman. She was temporary. A guest I hadn't wanted. Come spring, she'd be gone. But for now, with the storm raging outside and the fire warm inside, it was almost pleasant. Around 3 in the afternoon, we heard it, a loud crack from outside followed by frantic bellowing. I was on my feet instantly, grabbing my coat. One of the cows! Something's wrong! I ran out into the snow, not bothering to put on my heavy boots. The bellowing was coming from near the creek about 300 yards from the cabin. As I got closer, I saw the problem. One of my best heifers had wandered away from the shelter during the storm. She was stuck in a snowdrift near the frozen creek, thrashing and sinking deeper with every movement. Easy, girl, easy. I waded into the drift snow up to my thighs. The cow's eyes were rolling white with panic. If she kept thrashing, she'd exhaust herself, die of exposure or drown when she melted the snow around her. I got a rope around her neck, but she was heavy, 800 pounds at least, and the snow gave me nothing to brace against. I pulled until my shoulders screamed, but she barely moved. "Mr. Stedman." I turned to see Naomi wading toward me. She'd wrapped herself in one of my extra coats and had another coil of rope in her hands. "Go back, it's too deep. Tie this to her." She threw me the rope. "Then tie the other end to yourself. I'll pull from solid ground." "You can't pull this much weight?" "Not with that leg." "I don't have to pull the cow. I just have to pull you while you pull the cow." Her eyes were fierce. "Trust me." I didn't have time to argue. The cow was weakening. I tied her rope around my waist and threw the other end to Naomi. She caught it, wrapped it around a sturdy fence post, and began to haul. The technique was brilliant. Simple physics, really. She wasn't trying to move the cow directly. She was anchoring me so I could use my full strength without slipping. Together, we pulled. Inch by inch, the heifer started to move. Her front legs found purchase. Then her back legs. 5 minutes of straining, grunting effort. Later, the cow stumbled free of the drift and trotted off toward the barn, indignant but alive. I stood there, chest heaving, covered in snow and sweat, despite the cold. Naomi was bent over, hands on her knees, breathing hard. Her bad leg was trembling from the exertion. "That was smart," I said between breaths. "The rope technique. Where did you learn it?" "Shoshone women. We pull loads heavier than ourselves all the time. Travois sleds injured hunters." She straightened slowly, wincing. "You don't need strength. You need leverage and patience." I looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time. This small woman with a crippled leg, who'd just helped me save 800 pounds of stubborn beef, who'd woken early to make coffee, who'd reorganized my pantry and baked bread and mended my shirt. "Thank you," I said, "for helping. You didn't have to come out here." The cow would have died. Yes, she would have. We walked back to the cabin together, moving slowly through the deep snow. I noticed Naomi's limp was worse, now her bad leg dragging, but she didn't complain, didn't ask for help. Just kept moving forward with that grim determination I was beginning to recognize as her defining trait. Inside, we stripped off our wet coats and huddled by the fire. I poured us both coffee, stronger this time, and we sat in silence while the warmth seeped back into our bones. After a while, Naomi spoke quietly. "Your wife, Margaret, how did she die?" The question should have hurt, should have made me shut down the way I always did when people asked, but somehow, after what we'd just done together, it felt right to answer. "Pneumonia, started as a cold in March. By April, she couldn't breathe without coughing up blood. The doctor said there was nothing he could do. She died on a Tuesday, the 15th of April, 1881. You remember the exact day. I remember everything about that day. What she was wearing, what she said, the way the light came through the window. I stared into my coffee cup. She made me promise something before she died. What? That I wouldn't spend the rest of my life alone, that I'd find a way to keep living, not just surviving. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I haven't been very good at keeping that promise. Naomi was quiet for a long moment. Then, my mother made me promise something too, when she knew she was dying. What was it? She said, "Don't let them make you small. Don't let your leg define you. You are more than what's broken." Naomi's voice was thick with emotion. "But it's hard to remember that when everyone treats you like you're worthless." I looked at her. Really saw her. Not the limp, not the disability, but the person. The smart, capable, stubborn woman who just helped me save a cow and bake the best bread I'd tasted in years. "You're not worthless," I said. The words came out rougher than I intended. "You're the opposite of worthless." She looked up, surprise clear on her face. Our eyes met across the table. Something passed between us in that moment. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. Two broken people who'd promised their dying loved ones they'd keep living, both failing in their own ways. The moment stretched out warm and fragile. Then a gust of wind rattled the shutters, breaking the spell. We both looked away. That night, as the storm howled outside and the fire crackled low, I lay on my bedroll staring at the ceiling. Naomi was asleep in the bed, her breathing soft and even. The cabin was warm. My stomach was full. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel completely alone. It terrified me, because in 3 months, maybe 4, the snow would melt, the pass would open, and Naomi Whitehorse would walk out of my life as suddenly as she'd entered it. That was the plan. That was what I'd told her. But as I drifted toward sleep, I couldn't help wondering if maybe, just maybe, there might be another way, a better way. A way that didn't end with me alone again in this cabin talking to ghosts and burning my coffee. The storm raged for 3 more days. We settled into an easy rhythm. I'd wake to find coffee already made. We'd eat breakfast together, then I'd tend the livestock while Naomi maintained the cabin. In the afternoons, we'd work on small projects. She taught me which plants were useful for medicine and cooking. I taught her how to shoot my rifle, steadying her stance when her bad leg made her wobble. She was a surprisingly good shot. After an hour of practice, she could hit 3 out of 5 tin cans at 30 yards. "Not bad for someone who's never used a rifle," I said, impressed despite myself. "My grandfather taught me to use a bow. The principle is the same. Breathe out, be still, let the weapon do the work." She lowered the rifle, a satisfied smile on her face. "Though I admit this is louder and more effective at long range." "Perhaps, but arrows are silent, better for hunting when you don't want to scare every animal within 5 miles. I had to concede the point. "You're probably right." On the 4th morning, the storm finally broke. We woke to brilliant sunshine and a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The temperature had dropped even further, but at least the wind had stopped. The world was crystalline, every surface coated in ice that glittered like diamonds. We were standing on the porch taking in the transformed landscape when we heard horses approaching. 2 riders coming up the trail from town, their mounts struggling through the deep snow. As they got closer, I recognized the first rider, Marshal Henry Carter, the law in these parts. He was in his mid-50s, with a salt and pepper mustache, and the kind eyes of a man who still believed in justice. The second rider was his wife Emma, a handsome woman with graying blonde hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Jake," Henry called out as they approached, "heard you had a visitor. Thought we'd check in, make sure everything was all right." I helped them dismount and tie their horses. Emma immediately turned her attention to Naomi, who'd stayed back near the cabin door. "You must be Naomi," Emma said warmly, extending her hand. "I'm Emma Carter. This is my husband Henry. We wanted to make sure you were being treated well." Naomi looked surprised by the friendly greeting. She shook Emma's hand tentatively. "I'm well, thank you." Henry's expression was more serious as he turned to me. "Jake, I need to ask. Victor Whitehorse, he sold his sister to you. He tried. I didn't agree to any sale. He left her here and ran. I kept my voice level. I gave her shelter because the storm was coming, that's all. Henry nodded slowly, studying both of us. And you, Miss Whitehorse, are you here of your own free will? Has Jake treated you properly? Naomi's voice was firm. Mr. Stedman has been kind. He's given me food and shelter. He's treated me with respect. More respect than my own brother ever did. Emma smiled at that. Good. Because if he hadn't, I was prepared to take you home with me. She glanced at me. No offense, Jake. None taken. Actually, Emma continued, turning back to Naomi, I wanted to make you an offer. I run a dress shop in town. I'm always looking for skilled seamstresses. If you know how to sew, we could work out a trade. You teach me about medicinal herbs, I'll make you some proper winter clothes, and maybe pay you besides if you're interested in work. Naomi's eyes widened. I don't have money to pay you. I'm not asking for money, I'm asking for your knowledge and your skills. That's worth more than money to me. Emma's smile was genuine. What do you say? I would like that very much. As Emma and Naomi talked, Henry pulled me aside. His expression had turned grave. Jake, there's something you need to know. Silas Turner was in town asking about you, about Naomi specifically. My chest tightened. Silas Turner owned half the land around Iron Creek and wanted the other half. He ran the saloon, controlled the grain supply, and had his fingers in every business within 50 miles. He was also ruthless, amoral, and dangerous. What does Silas want with us? He's claiming Victor owed him money, a lot of money, $500. He says Victor's debt transfers to whoever took possession of his sister. That's ridiculous. I didn't take possession of anyone. She's a free person. I know that, you know that. But Silas has papers, or says he does, legal-looking documents with Victor's signature. Henry met my eyes. He's looking for an excuse to take your land, Jake. He's been after this ranch for years. He thinks if he can prove you owe him money, he can foreclose. My hands clenched into fists. That's fraud. Probably. But proving it will be hard. Victor's gone. No one knows where. And Silas has the best lawyers money can buy. Henry paused. There might be a way around this, though. What way? If Naomi wasn't property but family, if she was, say, your wife, then any claim Silas had would be invalid. You can't sell family members to settle debts. I stared at him. You're suggesting I marry her. I'm suggesting you protect both of you from a man who'll destroy you if given the chance. Henry's voice was quiet but urgent. Think about it, Jake. You need help on this ranch. She needs protection and a home. It doesn't have to be romantic, just legal, practical. I looked back at the cabin where Naomi and Emma were still talking, Naomi's face more animated than I'd ever seen it. She was laughing at something Emma said, and the sound was like bells. I need to think about this. Don't think too long. Silas will be here within 2 weeks to collect what he thinks he's owed. You need to be ready. After Henry and Emma left, I couldn't get the conversation out of my head. Marriage. To Naomi. It was insane. We barely knew each other. She was Shoshone, I was white. People in town would talk. They already were talking, probably. But the alternative was losing everything. The ranch, the land. Maybe even Naomi herself if Silas found some legal loophole to claim her as property. That thought made my blood boil. Naomi wasn't property. She was a person, a good person, one who deserved better than to be traded back and forth like livestock. That evening, as we sat by the fire after supper, I made a decision. Naomi, I need to talk to you about something serious. She set down the sock she was mending and looked at me attentively. All right. I told her everything. About Silas Turner, about the supposed debt, about Henry's suggestion. She listened without interrupting, her face growing more troubled with every word. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, you would marry me to protect your land. I would marry you to protect both of us. I leaned forward. Look, I know this isn't romantic. I know it's not what either of us planned. But Silas Turner is dangerous. If he gets his hooks into this ranch, we both lose. You'd have nowhere to go, and I'd have nothing left of what Margaret and I built. A marriage of convenience. Yes, on paper, we'd live as we have been, separate, respectful, but legally protected. She studied me with those amber eyes, and I had the unsettling feeling she was seeing right through to my bones. And in the spring, when the pass opens, if you want to leave, you can leave. The marriage would be real enough to protect us legally, but you'd still be free. Free. She repeated the word like it was foreign. I've never been free, Mr. Stedman, not truly. Then maybe it's time you were. She was quiet for so long, I thought she'd refuse. Then finally she nodded. All right, I'll marry you, for protection, for both of us. Relief and something else, something I couldn't quite name, flooded through me. Thank you. But I have one condition. Name it. If we do this, you stop calling me a burden. You stop treating me like I'm helpless. We're partners, equals. Or it doesn't work. I met her eyes and saw the steel beneath the surface. This woman had survived things I couldn't imagine. She'd earned the right to demand respect. Partners, I agreed, extending my hand. Equals. She took my hand, her grip firm, despite her small size. As our palms pressed together, I felt something shift, some invisible line being crossed. This was more than a business arrangement, more than a simple exchange of protection for labor. This was a promise, a commitment. The start of something neither of us fully understood yet. Outside, the wind picked up again. Another storm was building over the mountains, but inside the cabin with the fire warm and our hands still clasped, I felt something I hadn't felt since Margaret died. Hope. 3 days after Naomi and I shook hands on our arrangement, Sam Brooks came riding up through the snow. Sam was my nearest neighbor, 5 miles south near the bend in Iron Creek. He was 68 years old, weathered as old leather, with a white beard that reached halfway down his chest. He'd been a cavalry scout in his younger days, fought in more battles than he cared to remember, and now spent his retirement raising horses and dispensing unsolicited wisdom. He was also the closest thing I had to a friend. His arrival was announced by his bellowing voice long before I could see him through the morning fog. Jake Stedman. You got coffee on, or do I have to make it myself? I stepped out onto the porch, grinning despite myself. Sam, what brings you out in this cold news? Bad news, mostly. He dismounted stiffly, his joints clearly bothering him in the cold. And curiosity. Heard you got yourself a woman. Word travels fast. In a territory, this empty gossip is our main entertainment. He tied his horse and stomped up the porch steps. Then he saw Naomi through the open door, and his weathered face split into a huge smile. Well, now. The rumors don't do you justice, miss. I'm Sam Brooks, and I promise I'm much more charming than this grumpy bear you're living with. Naomi had tensed when she heard the male voice, but Sam's friendly demeanor seemed to ease her guard. I'm Naomi Whitehorse. Please come in. I just made coffee. A woman who makes good coffee, Jake, you better marry this one before someone else does. Sam winked at her as he entered, completely unaware he'd hit on the exact plan. Over coffee and the biscuits Naomi had somehow produced from my meager supplies, Sam got serious. Jake, I was in town yesterday. Heard some things at the saloon that worried me, about Silas Turner. I set down my cup. What kind of things? He's been telling anyone who'll listen that you're keeping an Indian woman illegally. Says you bought her from Victor Whitehorse, and that makes you guilty of human trafficking under territorial law. Naomi's face paled. I felt anger rise hot in my chest. That's a lie. Victor abandoned her here. I gave her shelter. I believe you. Most decent folks believe you. But Silas doesn't need the truth. He just needs enough people to question your character. Sam leaned forward. There's more. He's claiming Victor owed him $500. Says the debt transfers to whoever took possession of Victor's property, meaning her. He nodded toward Naomi. I already heard about that from Marshal Carter. Did you hear Silas has been collecting debts all over the territory? 3 ranchers foreclosed in the last 6 months. All of them had documentation issues. All of them lost their land to Silas. My blood ran cold. He's building an empire. He's building something. And your ranch is right in the middle of what he wants. Sam looked at Naomi, then back at me. You need protection. Legal protection. The kind that makes any claim he has invalid. Henry suggested the same thing. Sam's eyebrows rose. Marriage, yes. And I glanced at Naomi. She met my eyes and gave a small nod. We've agreed. For protection. For both of us. Sam studied us both for a long moment. Then he slapped his knee and let out a bark of laughter. Hot damn, that's the smartest thing you've done since Margaret passed. Silas won't see it coming. It's just a legal arrangement, I said quickly. Nothing more? Sure it is. Sam's eyes twinkled with amusement. Just like my horse is just a horse, not my best friend and confidant. He stood suddenly all business. When are you doing this thing? As soon as possible, before Silas makes his move. Then we better not waste time. I'll ride to Fort Washakie today. He looked at Naomi. Your grandfather, running deer. You'll want his blessing, won't you? Naomi's eyes widened. You know my grandfather. Served with him as a scout in '68. Best tracker I ever met. Saved my hide more times than I can count. Sam's expression softened. If you're going to marry this stubborn fool, you ought to do it proper, with family present. Tears welled in Naomi's eyes. I haven't seen my grandfather in 3 years. Victor wouldn't let me visit. Well, Victor's gone now, and if Jake here has any sense, he'll want to meet the man whose granddaughter he's marrying. Sam looked at me. You got a problem with that? I thought about it. Meeting her family. Asking permission properly. It was the right thing to do, the honorable thing. No problem, but Fort Washakie is 60 miles in this snow. 63, actually, but I've ridden worse and colder. Sam headed for the door. I'll be back in 4 days with running deer. You two figure out how to act like you actually like each other by then. After Sam left, the cabin felt different, charged somehow. The arrangement we'd made was becoming real. In 4 days, Naomi's grandfather would arrive. In less than a week, we'd be married. I should tell you about him, Naomi said quietly. She was standing by the window watching Sam's figure disappear into the white landscape. My grandfather. So, you know what to expect. All right. He's traditional. He believes in the old ways. He won't approve of this marriage easily. She turned to face me. He'll test you, ask you questions, judge whether you're worthy. I can handle that. Can you? Her eyes were serious. He'll want to know why you want to marry his granddaughter. He'll want to know your intentions. He'll see through any lie you tell. Then I'll tell him the truth, that you need protection and I need help, that we're entering this arrangement with respect and honesty, that I'll treat you well. And if he says no, I hadn't considered that possibility. Will he? Naomi was quiet for a moment. I don't know. He's proud. He might see this as me being used again, traded like property. You're not property. You're a person making a choice. Am I? The question hung in the air. Or am I just choosing the least terrible option available to me? The honesty of it stung. Because she was right. This wasn't freedom. This was survival. We were both doing what we had to do to protect ourselves from a man who wanted to destroy us. I'm sorry, I said. I wish I could offer you something better, a real choice, a real life. Don't apologize for giving me shelter and respect. That's more than most men would do. She turned back to the window. I just wish my mother could see this. She always said I'd find someone who saw past my leg to who I really was. I don't think she meant it would happen like this. Before I could respond, we heard a distant sound. Bells. Someone else was coming up the trail. I grabbed my rifle and went to the door. Through the morning mist, I could see a wagon approaching. Not Sam returning. Someone else. As it got closer, my stomach dropped. I recognized the wagon. And the man driving it. Silas Turner had come calling. He arrived with his usual entourage. 2 hired men, both armed, riding beside his fancy wagon. Silas himself sat up front, dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my entire cabin. He was 42 years old, but looked younger, with slicked-back dark hair and the kind of handsome face that concealed a rotten soul. Stedman. His voice was friendly, jovial even. That's what made him dangerous. Silas always smiled while he slipped the knife between your ribs. Beautiful morning, isn't it? Though I confess I didn't expect to find you entertaining guests. I stepped off the porch, rifle in hand, but not raised. State your business, Silas. Business. Always so direct, Jake. He climbed down from the wagon with practiced grace. I'm here about a matter of debt. Victor Whitehorse owed me $500. I understand his sister is staying with you. She is. Excellent. Then the debt transfers to you as her guardian. He pulled papers from inside his coat. I have the documentation right here. Victor's signature witnessed and notarized. I'm not her guardian. She's a free woman who's staying here of her own choice. Silas's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. The law says otherwise. When a man sells property to settle a debt, the new owner assumes all associated obligations. Victor sold me his sister's labor to clear his debt. You took her. Therefore you owe me. She's not property. She's a half-breed Indian woman with no legal status. In the eyes of the law, she's exactly property. He held out the papers. $500, Jake, or I file with the territorial court. You'll lose this ranch, and she'll be remanded to my custody until the debt is cleared. Every word he spoke made me want to put a bullet in him, but I kept my voice level. I don't have $500. I know. That's why I'm prepared to offer you terms. Work for me. Your ranch becomes part of my holdings. You manage it under my direction. In 10 years, assuming you meet all obligations, the debt is cleared and you get the deed back. 10 years as your servant. That's generous of you. I'm a businessman, not a monster. But his smile said otherwise. You have 2 weeks to decide. After that, I file the paperwork. Good day, Stedman. He climbed back into his wagon. As he turned to leave, he glanced toward the cabin window where Naomi stood watching. Oh, and do tell Miss Whitehorse that she's looking well. Such a shame about that leg. Must make her worth considerably less on the open market. I raised the rifle then, not pointing at him, but making my intent clear. Get off my land, Silas laughed. 2 weeks, Jake. Make the right choice. After he left, I stood in the snow for a long time, trying to control the rage burning through me. That man, that smiling, poisonous man, wanted to take everything. My land, my freedom, and Naomi. When I finally went back inside, Naomi was sitting at the table, her face pale. He means it. He'll take your ranch. He'll try. What are we going to do? I sat down across from her. We're going to do exactly what we planned. We're going to get married, and we're going to find a way to prove those documents are fake. How? I don't know yet, but Victor's signature on those papers. If he was drunk when he signed them, or if he was coerced, the documents are invalid. I leaned forward. We need to find Victor. He's gone to California. Maybe. Or maybe he's hiding somewhere closer, afraid of what Silas will do when he realizes the plan failed. I stood already planning. Sam knows every town and settlement within 200 miles. If Victor's still in the territory, Sam can find him. Naomi looked at me with something like hope in her eyes. You really think we can fight him? I think we have to try, because I'm not giving up this ranch without a fight. And I'm sure as hell not letting that man get his hands on you. The words came out more fierce than I intended. Protective, almost possessive. Naomi noticed. Something shifted in her expression. Why? She asked softly. Why do you care what happens to me? It was a fair question. A month ago, I would have said I didn't care, would have sent her away without a second thought. But now, after weeks of her coffee and her cooking and her quiet competence, after seeing her help save that cow and teach me about herbs and shoot targets with determination despite her bad leg, the answer was obvious. Because you deserve better than this, better than being traded and sold and treated like livestock. I met her eyes. You deserve to be free, to make your own choices, to live your own life. Even if that life is with you, even then, especially then, because if you stay, it'll be because you chose to, not because you had no other option. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood, limped across the space between us, and did something that shocked me. She placed her hand on my arm, light tentative, but there. "Thank you, Jake Stedman, for seeing me as a person. That's rarer than you think." The warmth of her hand on my arm spread through me like whiskey. I covered her hand with mine, and we stood there in the quiet cabin, two damaged people making a stand against the darkness. Outside, storm clouds were gathering again, but inside something else was building, something that felt almost like hope. 4 days later, Sam returned with running deer. The old Shoshone elder was exactly as Naomi had described, tall despite his age, straight-backed. His long white hair hung in braids down his back, decorated with feathers and beads. His face was deeply lined, each wrinkle a story, and his eyes were sharp as broken flint. He dismounted his horse with the grace of a much younger man. When Naomi saw him, she let out a cry and ran from the cabin, her limp forgotten in her joy. He caught her in his arms, speaking rapidly in Shoshone. She answered in the same language, and I heard tears in her voice. Sam grinned at me. "Told you he'd come?" "Thank you, Sam. Don't thank me yet. He's not happy about this situation. Took some convincing to get him to even consider it." Running Deer approached me, his granddaughter still clinging to his arm. His eyes evaluated me the way a man might evaluate a horse he's thinking of buying. Thorough, clinical, missing nothing. "You are Jacob Stedman." His English was accented but clear. "I am. It's an honor to meet you, sir. My granddaughter says you wish to marry her." "I do. Why?" The bluntness of the question was refreshing after Silas's oily manipulation. I decided to match his honesty with my own. "Because a man named Silas Turner wants to destroy us both. He has false papers claiming Naomi's brother owed him money. He says the debt transfers to me because Naomi is here. If we marry, his claim is invalid. She becomes family, not property. So you marry her for legal protection?" "Yes." "Do you love her?" I hesitated. The old man's eyes bored into me. "I respect her. I care about her welfare. I want her to be safe and happy. If that's love, then yes. If you mean the kind of love I had for my late wife, then no, not yet. But I think it could be in time." Running Deer studied me for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. "You speak truth. That is good. Better than pretty lies." He looked at Naomi. "And you, granddaughter, you choose this?" Naomi nodded. "I do, grandfather. I choose this." "Why?" "Because he treats me with respect. Because he sees me as a person, not a burden. Because when I'm with him, I feel safe." She paused. "And because he's teaching me that I'm stronger than I knew." Running Deer placed a hand on her head, a gesture of blessing. Then he turned back to me. "My granddaughter's mother married a man not of her people. I did not approve, but they loved each other truly, and he died protecting her. So I learned that honor matters more than blood." He extended his hand to me. "You have my blessing, Jacob Stedman. But know this. If you betray her trust, if you harm her or cast her aside, I will find you. And I am old, but I am not weak." I took his hand. His grip was iron. "I understand, and I give you my word. I'll treat her with honor. Then let us have a wedding." The ceremony took place 2 days later at the marshal's office in Iron Creek. Henry Carter officiated with Emma Sam and Running Deer as witnesses. A handful of townspeople showed up curious about the scandalous marriage between the widowed rancher and the crippled Indian woman. Most were supportive. A few whispered behind their hands. I didn't care what any of them thought. Naomi wore a new dress Emma had made for her. Simple but beautiful pale blue wool that brought out the gold in her eyes. Someone had woven wildflowers into her hair despite it being winter. I later learned Emma had been saving dried flowers for just such an occasion. I wore my best shirt and the jacket I'd worn to Margaret's funeral. It felt strange standing there about to take vows again. But when I looked at Naomi standing straight and proud despite her bad leg, I felt something settle in my chest. This was right. Maybe not romantic, maybe not conventional, but right. Henry began the ceremony. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here." The words washed over me. I'd heard them before with Margaret, but this time felt different. This time I was making promises not out of love, but out of respect, out of partnership, out of a shared determination to survive. "Do you, Jacob Stedman, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Naomi Whitehorse, take this man to be, your lawfully wedded husband?" Naomi's voice was steady. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the Wyoming Territory, I pronounce you husband and wife." Henry smiled. "You may kiss the bride." I hadn't considered this part. Neither had Naomi, apparently. We looked at each other awkwardly. Then she rose on her tiptoes, I leaned down, and our lips met in the briefest, most chaste kiss imaginable. But even that brief contact sent electricity through me. Her lips were soft. She smelled like sage and wood smoke. When we pulled apart, her cheeks were flushed, and I wondered if mine were too. The small crowd applauded. Sam let out a whoop. Running Deer nodded his approval. Emma was crying happy tears. And through the window, watching from across the street, I saw Silas Turner. His face was a mask of cold fury. He'd lost this round, but his eyes promised this war wasn't over. Let him come, I thought. Let him try. Because now Naomi was legally my wife, and I'd burn this whole territory down before I let anyone hurt her. We spent that night at Sam's ranch, giving Running Deer and Naomi time together before the old man returned to Fort Washakie. I sat on Sam's porch drinking whiskey and watching the stars. "You did good today," Sam said. "Did I? I married a woman I barely know to thwart a land grab." "You married a good woman who needed protection. That's more than most men would do." Sam refilled my glass. "Give it time, Jake. Sometimes the best partnerships start practical and grow into something more." "You think so?" "I know so. You should see the way you look at her when she's not watching, and the way she looks at you." Sam grinned. "This marriage might have started practical, but it won't stay that way. Mark my words." I didn't answer, just drank my whiskey and thought about amber eyes and the ghost of sage-scented lips. Maybe Sam was right. Maybe this could become something more. But first, we had to survive Silas Turner, and that fight was just beginning. The first week of our marriage passed in a strange, careful dance. Naomi and I were husband and wife on paper, but strangers in practice. We moved around each other, politely maintaining the same respectful distance we'd kept before the ceremony. She still slept in the bed. I still took the floor by the fire. We worked together during the day, ate meals in companionable silence, and never once acknowledged the tension that hummed between us like a plucked wire. But the townspeople of Iron Creek noticed. Emma Carter visited 3 times that first week, ostensibly to bring wedding gifts: a quilt she'd sewn, a set of good dishes, a bolt of fabric for Naomi to make curtains. But really, she came to check on us, to make sure this arrangement was working, that I was keeping my word. "How are you settling in?" Emma asked Naomi on her 3rd visit while I was outside chopping wood. Through the window, I could see them sitting at the table, heads close together. Naomi's laughter drifted out light and genuine. It was a sound I'd heard more often lately, and each time it made something warm bloom in my chest. When Emma finally left, Naomi came to help me stack the wood. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, her eyes bright. "Emma invited me to her sewing circle next Thursday. She says the women meet every week to work on quilts and share news. You should go. You don't mind?" "Why would I mind?" "You're not a prisoner here, Naomi. You're free to come and go as you please." I set down the axe. Besides, it'll be good for you to have friends, female friends. She studied me with those penetrating amber eyes. You're a strange man, Jake Stedman. Most husbands would object to their wives spending time away from home. I'm not most husbands, and this isn't a traditional marriage. Something flickered across her face. Disappointment, relief I couldn't tell. She turned away before I could decipher it. I'll finish preparing supper. That evening, as we ate the venison stew she'd prepared, I noticed she was quieter than usual, pensive. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. You're a terrible liar. She set down her spoon and sighed. Emma asked me today if I was happy, if this marriage was what I wanted. She paused. I told her yes, but I'm not sure that was the truth. My stomach tightened. Do you regret it? No, that's not what I meant. She struggled to find words. I'm grateful. You've given me safety and respect. But sometimes I wonder what my mother would think. She married for love. She chose my father despite everyone telling her not to. And I married for survival. Your mother would understand that you did what you had to do. That's not shameful, isn't it? Her eyes met mine, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. Don't you ever wish things were different, that we'd met under better circumstances? The question hung in the air. Honest, raw, demanding an answer I wasn't sure I could give. Yes, I said finally, I do wish that. I wish I'd met you when Margaret was still alive, when you were still with your mother, when we both had the luxury of choosing rather than surviving. I leaned forward, but we didn't. We met in the worst possible circumstances, and we made the best choice we could with what we had. And that's enough for you. It has to be, because the alternative was losing everything. I reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close. But that doesn't mean it always has to be this way. We have time to learn each other, to see if this partnership can become something more. She looked at my hand so close to hers. Then slowly, deliberately, she closed the distance. Her fingers intertwined with mine, small, calloused from work, but strong. I'd like that, she whispered. We sat there in the lamplight, hands clasped, while the fire crackled and the wind howled outside. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't passionate, but it was real. And, for now, that was enough. The fragile peace lasted exactly 9 days. On the morning of the 10th day after our wedding, Sam came thundering up the trail on his fastest horse. His face was grim, his usual jovial demeanor completely absent. Jake, Naomi, get out here. I was outside immediately, rifle in hand. Naomi followed, wiping flour from her hands. Sam, what's wrong? Town meeting, called by Silas Turner for tonight. 7 o'clock sharp. Sam dismounted, breathing hard. He's making his move. My blood ran cold. What kind of move? He's presenting evidence to the town council. Claims he has witnesses who saw Victor sign over rights to Naomi. Says your marriage is a fraud done specifically to avoid legitimate debt. He wants the council to void it and rule in his favor. Can he do that? If he convinces enough people, yes. The territorial courts are backed up for months. By the time a judge hears the case, Silas will have already taken possession of your ranch under local authority. Sam's expression was dark. He's been planning this, Jake. Laying groundwork, getting people on his side. Naomi's hand found mine, squeezing tight. What do? We fight, I said. We go to that meeting and we tell the truth. The truth against Silas Turner's money and influence. Sam shook his head. You'll need more than that. You'll need allies. People willing to stand up and speak for you. Will you? Hell yes, I will. But I'm one old man. You need the whole community behind you. Sam looked between us. You need to make them care. Make them see what Silas really is. How do we do that? By showing them you're not some scheme to dodge debt. By showing them your marriage is real, that you're part of this community. Sam's eyes were calculating. And by finding out if anyone else has been hurt by Silas's tactics. Naomi spoke up, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. Emma mentioned something about other ranchers who lost their land. 3 of them in the last year. That's right, Sam confirmed. John Mitchell, Thomas Crawford, and Will Henderson, all good men, all foreclosed on by Silas over disputed debts. Where are they now? Scattered. Mitchell moved to Cheyenne. Crawford went back east. Henderson's still around working at the livery in town. Sam's face lit up. Henderson, if we could get him to testify about how Silas operates. Why would he? I asked. He already lost everything. Why stick his neck out again? Because men like Henderson don't forget. They just wait for the right moment. Sam was already moving toward his horse. I'll talk to him. You two get ready for tonight. And Jake? Yeah. Wear your good clothes. This needs to look serious. After Sam left, Naomi and I stood on the porch watching storm clouds build over the mountains. Another blizzard was coming, but this time the real storm would be in that town meeting. I'm scared, Naomi admitted quietly. So am I. What if they don't believe us? What if Silas wins? I turned to face her, taking both her hands in mine. Then we leave. We pack what we can carry, take the horses, and ride until we find somewhere Silas's influence doesn't reach. And your ranch, everything you and Margaret built, is just land and wood. You're more important. The words came out before I could stop them, raw and honest. I've already lost one person I cared about. I won't lose another, not to that man. Her eyes searched mine. You care about me. Of course I do. You're my wife. On paper. In every way that matters. I squeezed her hands. Naomi, this might have started as a business arrangement, but somewhere along the way you became more than that. You became someone I look forward to seeing every morning, someone whose laughter makes this cabin feel like a home again, someone worth fighting for. Tears welled in her eyes. Jake, I know you don't feel the same way. That's all right. You don't have to, but I need you to know that whatever happens tonight, I'm on your side. Always. She rose on her tiptoes just as she had during our wedding kiss, but this time, when our lips met, it wasn't chaste or brief. This kiss was real, deep, full of all the complicated emotions we'd been dancing around for weeks. Fear and hope and desperation and something that might have been the beginning of love. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against mine. I feel the same way. I've been afraid to admit it. Afraid this was all just survival, but it's not. Not anymore. No, I agreed. It's not. We stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, while the wind picked up and the first snowflakes began to fall. Whatever happened tonight, we'd face it together. The Iron Creek Community Hall was packed when we arrived. Every seat was taken with people standing along the walls and crowding in the doorway. The whole town had turned out, some to support us, many just curious, and more than a few looking hostile. Silas Turner sat at the front table with 2 men I didn't recognize. Lawyers, probably. He wore his best suit and his most winning smile. When he saw us enter, his smile widened. Ah, the happy couple. So glad you could join us. Henry Carter stood at the front of the room, gaveling for order. As the town marshal and de facto mayor, he ran these meetings. All right, settle down. We're here to address Silas Turner's claim against Jacob Stedman. Silas, you have the floor. Silas stood every inch the respectable businessman. Thank you, Henry. Ladies and gentlemen, I come before you tonight with a heavy heart. It pains me to bring accusations against a neighbor, but justice demands I speak. He pulled papers from his coat. 6 weeks ago, Victor Whitehorse signed a promissory note, $500 witnessed and notarized. He failed to repay. As collateral, he signed over custodial rights to his sister, Naomi Whitehorse. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Silas continued, his voice full of false sympathy. Mr. Stedman took possession of Miss Whitehorse. Under territorial law, he assumed the debt. However, rather than pay what's owed, he married her, a transparent attempt to avoid legitimate obligation. That's not true. I stood up. Victor abandoned his sister here. I gave her shelter. We married because we wanted to, not to avoid any debt. Convenient timing, though, isn't it? Silas's smile was poisonous. Tell me Mr. Stedman did you know about the debt when you married her?" The room went silent. Everyone waited for my answer. If I said yes, it proved his point. If I said no, I looked like a fool. I knew Silas Turner was trying to steal my land through legal manipulation. I said clearly. So yes, I knew there was a supposed debt, but I also knew it was based on false premises and fraudulent documentation. Fraudulent. Silas looked shocked. "Marshal Carter, I have witnesses, men who saw Victor sign these papers of his own free will." "Bring them forward," Henry said. Two men stepped up. I recognized them as regular fixtures at Silas's saloon, drunks who do anything for whiskey money. The first one, a ratty-looking man named Pete, spoke up. "I seen Victor sign them papers, clear as day. He was sober too. Knew what he was doing." "And when was this?" Henry asked. December 15th, I think." Naomi stood up suddenly. "That's impossible. Victor was at Fort Washakie on December 15th. Grandfather saw him there. He was drunk and gambling." Running Deer, who'd stayed in town for this meeting, stood from where he'd been sitting quietly. "My granddaughter speaks truth. Victor was at the fort. I saw him with my own eyes." Pete's face went red. "Well, maybe it was the 14th. Maybe," Henry's voice was sharp. "Either you remember or you don't." The second witness, equally unreliable looking, couldn't keep his story straight either. Within minutes, Henry had dismantled their testimony, but Silas didn't look worried. "Perhaps my witnesses are mistaken about dates, but the signature is real. Victor signed these papers, that's indisputable." "Actually," a voice spoke from the back of the room, "it's very disputable." Everyone turned. Will Henderson stepped forward. He was in his 50s, weather-beaten and worn, but his eyes were clear and angry. "I know something about Silas Turner's documentation, because he used the same tactics on me." The room erupted in whispers. Silas's face went cold. "Mr. Henderson, your case was settled. You have no standing here." "I have every right to speak." Will walked to the front, his work boots loud on the wooden floor. 2 years ago, Silas claimed I owed him $300, had papers to prove it. My signature witnessed, notarized, just like Victor's. And Silas's voice was tight. "And I was so drunk when I signed them, I don't remember doing it. Silas plied me with whiskey, waited until I couldn't stand, then shoved papers in front of me. I signed thinking they were supply receipts. They were actually loan agreements with ridiculous terms." "This is slander," Silas said, but his confidence was cracking. "It's truth." Will looked around the room. "How many of you have debts to Silas? How many signed papers you don't quite remember? How many felt like you didn't have a choice?" Slowly hands began to rise. 3, 5, 10. More than a dozen people in that room owed Silas money under suspicious circumstances. Emma Carter stood up. "My cousin in Laramie had the same experience. Silas got him drunk, had him sign papers, then foreclosed 6 months later. This isn't an isolated incident. This is a pattern." The room was buzzing now, people comparing stories, realizing they'd all been manipulated by the same man. Silas's face had gone from confident to panicked. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice rising. "You're all conspiring against a legitimate businessman because you don't want to pay your debts." "No," I said, standing. "We're exposing a predator who's been using the law to steal from honest people." Henry gavelled for order. "Silas Turner, in light of these testimonies, I'm declaring your claim against Jacob Stedman invalid pending a full investigation. Furthermore, I'm forwarding all of tonight's testimony to the territorial court for review of your business practices." "You can't do this." "I just did. This meeting is adjourned." The room erupted in applause. People surged forward to shake my hand, to congratulate Naomi, to thank Will Henderson for his bravery. Sam was grinning like a fool. Emma was crying happy tears. Running Deer nodded his approval from across the room. But through it all, I watched Silas Turner. He gathered his papers with shaking hands, his lawyers already edging toward the door. As he turned to leave, his eyes met mine. The hatred there was pure and cold. This wasn't over. He'd been publicly humiliated, his schemes exposed. Men like Silas didn't forgive that. They retaliated. But for tonight, we'd won. The community had stood together against corruption, and Naomi and I were safe. As we walked out into the snowy night, her hand tucked in the crook of my arm, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not just hope, but pride. Pride in my wife who'd stood tall despite her fear. Pride in my community who'd found their courage when it mattered. And pride in myself for finally fighting for something worth keeping. "What happens now?" Naomi asked as we climbed into the wagon. "Now we go home. We live our lives. We build something good. And Silas will be someone else's problem. The territorial court doesn't take kindly to fraud." I snapped the reins, starting the horses moving. "He's done in this territory." Naomi leaned against my shoulder, a gesture of trust and affection that warmed me more than any fire. "Thank you, Jake, for fighting for me, for us. Always, I promised. And I meant it." The snow was falling heavily now, covering the road ahead in fresh white. But I wasn't worried. We had supplies, we had shelter, we had each other. And sometimes in this hard land, that was more than enough. As we crested the hill overlooking the ranch, I saw our cabin in the distance, windows glowing with the lamp we'd left burning. It looked warm and welcoming, like a home. Naomi saw it too and smiled. "Our home," she said softly. "Yes," I agreed. "Our home." And for the first time since Margaret's death, I believed it. This wasn't just a house anymore. It wasn't just land and wood and memories of what used to be. It was the beginning of something new, something unexpected, something worth every fight, every hardship, every moment of doubt. It was where I belonged, with Naomi, my partner, my wife, my future. The storm could rage outside all it wanted. Inside, we'd keep each other warm. The weeks following the town meeting passed in a blur of unexpected peace. Silas Turner left Iron Creek 3 days after his public humiliation. Word spread that he'd sold his saloon and most of his holdings to pay legal fees. The territorial court had launched a full investigation into his business practices, and the weight of testimony against him was crushing. Men who'd been too afraid to speak before suddenly found their voices. By the time the court finished, Silas's empire was ruins. Good riddance. But his departure left a strange vacuum in town. For years he'd been the center around which everything revolved. The man with money, with influence, with power. Now that he was gone, Iron Creek had to figure out how to function without him. The community stepped up. Sam Brooks organized a cooperative where ranchers could pool resources for expensive equipment. Emma Carter expanded her sewing business, hiring 3 women who'd lost income when Silas's businesses closed. Henry Carter worked with the territorial governor to establish fair lending practices so no one else could prey on desperate people. And Naomi and I settled into our marriage. It was strange how naturally it happened. The careful distance we'd maintained began to dissolve. Small touches became common. Her hand on my shoulder as she served dinner, my arm around her waist when we walked to the barn, conversations that lasted late into the night, covering everything from childhood memories to dreams for the future. We were learning each other, and what we learned, we liked. One evening in early March, as the first hints of spring began to show in the melting snow, Naomi asked me something I'd been expecting. "Tell me about Margaret." We were sitting by the fire, her mending a shirt, me working saddle soap into a bridle. The question should have hurt. Should have felt like a betrayal, but instead it felt right, like a door that needed to be opened. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. How you met, what she was like, why you loved her." Naomi set down her sewing. "I want to understand the woman whose place I've taken." "You haven't taken her place. You've made your own." But I understood what she meant. Margaret was a teacher, came west with her family in '76. I met her at a barn raising. She was 22, I was 26. She had red hair and freckles and the most infectious laugh I'd ever heard. Was it love at first sight? No, it was something better. It was friendship first. We talked for hours that day, about books, about the territory, about what we wanted from life. She dreamed of building a school. I dreamed of building a ranch. I smiled at the memory. We decided we could do both together. And did you? We started to. Built this cabin. Claimed the land. She taught children in our main room during winter months. We had 5 good years. The pain was still there, but duller now. Then she got sick. Pneumonia that turned into consumption. She fought for 6 weeks, but in the end, I couldn't finish. Naomi moved from her chair to sit beside me on the floor, her shoulder pressing against mine. You don't have to say more. I want to. I took a breath. The last thing she told me was to keep living, to find someone else, to not let grief consume me. She made me promise. And you've kept that promise. I've tried. It took 2 years and you arriving in a wagon, but I'm finally trying. I turned to look at her. Does it bother you that I loved someone else first? No. Her answer was immediate and certain. My mother loved my father deeply. When he died, she mourned. But she also told me that the heart has infinite capacity, that loving one person doesn't diminish your ability to love another. She took my hand. I think Margaret would approve of me, of us. I think she would too. We sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped watching the fire. Then Naomi spoke again, softer this time. I'm falling in love with you, Jake Stedman. I didn't mean to. I didn't plan to, but it's happening anyway. My breath caught. We'd danced around these feelings for weeks, but neither of us had said the words. Naomi, you don't have to say it back. I just wanted you to know. Because life is uncertain, and tomorrow isn't promised, and I'm tired of hiding how I feel. I turned to face her, fully cupping her face in my calloused hands. I love you too. I have for weeks. I just didn't know if I was allowed to, if it was too soon or too complicated, or if you'd think I was betraying Margaret's memory. Love isn't betrayal. Love is honoring the promise you made to keep living. Her eyes were luminous in the firelight. So live, Jake. Live with me. I kissed her then. Not the chaste kiss from our wedding, or even the desperate kiss before the town meeting. This was different. This was a kiss between 2 people who'd chosen each other not out of necessity, but out of genuine affection. It was slow and sweet and full of promise. When we finally pulled apart, both breathless, Naomi smiled. I suppose this means our marriage of convenience has become rather inconvenient for anyone who thought we were just business partners. I laughed, the sound surprising me. I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed like that, pure and genuine and full of joy. I suppose it does. Good. She stood, offering me her hand. Now come to bed, properly, if you're willing. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. I took her hand and let her lead me across the cabin to the bed we'd been sharing in spirit, but not in body. That night, as the fire burned low and the wind whispered through the pines, we became husband and wife in every sense of the word. And it felt like coming home. The next morning I woke to find Naomi already up, standing at the window in one of my shirts. The early light turned her skin golden, and I took a moment just to look at her. My wife. Truly, completely mine, as I was hers. What are you looking at? I asked, my voice rough with sleep. Spring is coming. You can smell it in the air. The earth is waking up. She turned to smile at me. I was thinking about what we could plant. A vegetable garden, definitely, but also medicinal herbs. I could teach the women in town which plants are useful. Emma said there's interest. I sat up, pulling on my pants. You want to be a healer like your mother? I want to be useful, to contribute to this community that's been so kind to us. She limped over to sit beside me, her bad leg clearly stiff from the cold. Is that all right? Or do you need me here all the time? Naomi, you're not my prisoner. You're my partner. If you want to teach healing, teach healing. If you want to open a school like Margaret planned, do that. Whatever makes you happy makes me happy. Her smile could have lit the whole territory. How did I get so lucky? I think we both got lucky, against all odds. We spent that morning planning, not just for the garden or her teaching, but for the future, a real future. Children, maybe, though we both agreed there was no rush. Expanding the ranch, building that school, growing old together on this land we both loved. It felt almost too good to be true, like any moment something would shatter this fragile happiness. I should have trusted that instinct. The trouble came on a gray afternoon in late March. I was in the north pasture checking on the cattle as they emerged from their winter shelter, weak but alive. Naomi was at Emma's working with the sewing circle. Everything was peaceful, normal. Then I heard the gunshot. One shot from the direction of the cabin. My blood turned to ice. I ran, leaving the cattle running faster than I'd ever run in my life. My mind conjured terrible images. Bandits, outlaws, someone sent by Silas for revenge. I burst through the cabin door, rifle raised, ready for anything. What I found was Running Deer sitting calmly at my table, a rifle across his knees and a dead wolf on my floor. "Grandfather," I lowered my weapon, heart still hammering. "What? How did you get here?" He gestured toward the window with his chin. "I rode fast when the vision came. My horse is outside." "The wolf was stalking your livestock. I tracked it here." He gestured to the carcass with the respect due a worthy opponent. "It was old, hungry, desperate. It would have killed many cattle before you stopped it." I looked at the wolf. It was indeed old, its muzzle gray ribs showing. A creature at the end of its life, trying to survive any way it could. I felt an unexpected kinship with it. "Thank you. But what are you doing here? I thought you went back to Fort Washakie." "I did, but I came back because I had a vision." Running Deer's weathered face was serious. "A warning for my granddaughter and the man she married." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I'd heard enough stories from Naomi to know that Running Deer's visions were not to be dismissed. "What kind of warning?" "Sit. This will take time to explain." I sat. Running Deer produced a pipe from his pouch, lit it with ritual care, and took several draws before speaking. "3 nights ago, I dreamed of a snake with a silver tongue. It had been wounded and driven from its den, but snakes do not give up their territory easily. They hide, they wait, and when their enemies are vulnerable, they strike." "Silas," I said flatly. "The man Turner, yes. He has not left this territory. He is hiding, planning, waiting for the moment to take revenge on those who humiliated him. He was seen leaving. Multiple people confirmed it. What people see and what is true are not always the same." Running Deer's eyes were grave. "I spoke with friends at the reservation. They heard talk of a man matching Turner's description. He is living rough in the mountains, gathering men, preparing something." My gut twisted. "Do you know what?" "No. Only that it will come when you are most vulnerable, when you believe you are safe." He stood gathering his rifle. "I came to warn you, to tell you to be vigilant. The snake is still dangerous, perhaps more dangerous now that it has been wounded." "Where is he, specifically?" "The old mining camp near Dead Horse Canyon, abandoned 10 years ago, perfect for a man who wishes to hide." Running Deer moved toward the door. "But do not try to confront him. Men like Turner are most dangerous when cornered. Let the law handle this." "I will. Thank you for the warning." Running Deer paused at the threshold. "My granddaughter loves you. I see it in her eyes when she speaks of you. She has found happiness I never thought possible for her." His gaze pinned me. "Do not let the snake take that from her." "I won't. I promise." After he left, I sat alone with the dead wolf and a growing sense of dread. Silas was out there, planning something, and I had no idea when or how he'd strike. Then I noticed something. Pinned to the wolf's thick fur, barely visible against the gray coat, was a small piece of paper, folded tight and secured with a thorn. My hands shook as I pulled it free. The paper was weathered, dirty, like it had been carried for days. I unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. Jake, forgive me. Silas has Tommy. My boy is only 8 years old. He said he'd kill him if I didn't help at the town meeting. Said he'd hurt him if I warned anyone. I testified against Silas because I thought it would end this. But it made things worse. Now Silas is planning something terrible. He has my son hidden somewhere, and I can't find him. Please, if you're reading this, help Tommy. He's innocent. This is my fault, not his. Will Henderson. The paper slipped from my fingers. Will Henderson. The man who'd stood up at the town meeting. The man whose testimony had helped destroy Silas's reputation. He'd been coerced. His 8-year-old son was being held hostage. This wasn't just about revenge on me and Naomi anymore. An innocent child was in danger. And Silas was desperate enough, crazy enough to use that child as leverage. I needed to tell Henry, to warn the town, to find Tommy Henderson before Silas did something unforgivable. But first, I needed to tell Naomi. She returned home at sunset, her arms full of fabric and her face glowing with happiness. Jake, you'll never believe what happened. Mrs. Henderson asked me to treat her son's fever, and the herbs worked. He's already better. She paid me with this fabric and... She stopped, seeing my face. What's wrong? I told her everything. Running deer's warning, the vision, Silas hiding in the mountains. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing more troubled with each word. When I finished, she sank into a chair. He's going to try to kill us. I won't let that happen. Jake, he has nothing left to lose. No reputation, no business, no future. Men like that are capable of anything. Her voice shook. Maybe we should leave. Go somewhere he can't find us. And let him win. Let him drive us from our home. I knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. No, we're not running. We're going to be smart and careful and prepared. But we're not running. What if he hurts you? What if I lose you just when I found you? The fear in her voice broke my heart. I pulled her close, letting her bury her face in my shoulder. You won't lose me. I promise. You can't promise that. I can, and I do. I pulled back to look at her. Naomi, I survived 2 years of grief that should have killed me. I survived the worst winter in memory. I survived Silas's first attempt to destroy me. I'll survive whatever he tries next, because I have something worth surviving for now. You. She kissed me, then fierce and desperate, like she could keep me safe through sheer force of will. When we pulled apart, her eyes were wet but determined. Then we fight. Together. Together, I agreed. The next morning, I rode to town with Naomi. We went straight to Henry's office and told him everything. He listened gravely, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. Dead Horse Canyon, he mused. That's outside my jurisdiction. I'd need to coordinate with the territorial marshal, get a posse together. How long will that take? 3, maybe 4 days. He saw my expression and held up a hand. I know it's not ideal, but we need to do this right. Legal. No vigilante justice that Silas can use against us later. And in the meantime, you stay vigilant, keep your rifle close, don't go anywhere alone. He looked at Naomi. That goes for you too, Mrs. Stedman. Until this is resolved, you should stay where there are people, here in town or at your ranch with Jake. We spent the next 3 days in a state of tense waiting. Sam Brooks came to stay at the ranch, adding his rifle to our defense. Emma insisted Naomi spend her days at the dress shop, surrounded by women and within shouting distance of Henry's office. At night we fortified the cabin, barred the windows, kept weapons loaded and ready. It felt like being under siege by an invisible enemy. On the 4th day, Henry assembled his posse, 10 men, all experienced with firearms, all volunteers who'd suffered under Silas's schemes. They rode out at dawn, heading for Dead Horse Canyon. I wasn't with them. Henry had been firm. You're too personally involved. If shooting starts and you kill Silas, his lawyers will call it murder, not justice. Stay here. Protect your wife. Let us handle this. So I stayed, and I waited, and I hated every second of it. The posse returned at dusk, but something was wrong. I could tell from the way they rode. Slow. Defeated. Henry dismounted, his face grim. He's gone. The camp showed signs of recent occupation, but it was abandoned. Maybe yesterday, maybe the day before. Gone where? We don't know. We tracked him east for a few miles, but lost the trail in the creek. Henry removed his hat, running a hand through his gray hair. I'm sorry, Jake. We'll keep looking, but right now, Silas Turner is in the wind. That night, lying in bed with Naomi curled against me, I stared at the ceiling and tried to quiet the voice in my head that said this wasn't over. That Silas was still out there, still planning, still dangerous. Stop thinking so loud, Naomi murmured. I can hear you worrying from here. Sorry. Don't be sorry, just come back to me. Stop living in fear of what might happen and be here now with me. She was right. I could spend every moment terrified of Silas's revenge, or I could live, really live, love my wife, work my ranch, build the future we'd planned. You're the wisest person I know, I said, pulling her closer. Remember that next time we argue about something? She kissed my shoulder. Now sleep. Tomorrow we have gardens to plant and a life to live. I closed my eyes and let her warmth chase away the shadows. Silas Turner was out there somewhere. But he wasn't here. And here in this bed, in this cabin with this woman, I was safe. For tonight that was enough. But deep down, I knew Running Deer's warning would prove true. The snake would strike. It was only a matter of when. And when it did, I'd be ready. Spring arrived in full force, transforming the Wyoming landscape from white desolation to vibrant green almost overnight. The creek swelled with snowmelt rushing and singing over rocks. Wildflowers erupted across the meadows in riots of purple and yellow. The cattle grew fat on new grass, and the world felt reborn. Naomi's garden flourished. She'd planted it with the same careful attention she brought to everything. Rows of vegetables for eating, patches of medicinal herbs for healing, and along the edges wildflowers she'd transplanted from the mountains. She worked in it every morning, her hands in the earth, her face lifted to the sun. I'd never seen her happier. Look at this, she called to me one morning in early May. I was mending the corral fence, but I set down my tools and walked over. She was kneeling in the dirt holding up a tiny green shoot. The sage took root, and here the yarrow is already spreading. You have a gift, I said, crouching beside her. My mother's gift. She could make anything grow even in the hardest soil. Naomi's eyes were distant with memory. She used to say that healing starts with the earth, that plants hold the wisdom of generations if we're willing to listen. And are you listening? She smiled. Every day. The plants tell me it's going to be a good year, warm with enough rain but not too much. The kind of year where everything thrives. I hoped she was right. We needed a good year. After the chaos with Silas, the community needed time to heal and rebuild, and Naomi and I needed time to simply be married, to learn the rhythms of daily life together without crisis looming over us. But peace is a fragile thing in wild country. It happened on a Thursday afternoon in mid-May. I was in the north pasture with Sam inspecting a section of fence that needed replacing. Naomi was supposed to be at Emma's dress shop, teaching her weekly herb class to the town women. It was routine, safe. Then we saw the smoke, a thin black column rising from the direction of town. Too much smoke for a chimney fire, too controlled for a wildfire. This was something else. That's coming from Main Street, Sam said, his face going pale. We didn't waste time with words. We ran for our horses and rode hard toward Iron Creek. As we got closer, the smoke got thicker, and I could hear shouting, screaming. The dress shop was on fire. Flames engulfed the back half of Emma's building, orange tongues licking at the wooden walls and roof. People were running with buckets from the creek forming a chain, but the fire was spreading faster than they could fight it. Naomi, I was off my horse before it stopped moving, running toward the burning building. Naomi? Emma grabbed my arm, her face black with soot. She's not here. She left 10 minutes before it started. She's safe. Relief hit me so hard I nearly collapsed. Where did she go? Home. Your ranch. She forgot something she needed for the class. The relief turned to ice in my veins. Home. Alone. With Silas still out there somewhere. "Jake, help us with the fire," Henry called. But my instincts were screaming. This was wrong. The timing was too perfect. Naomi leaves early. Fire breaks out. Everyone in town is distracted. "This is a diversion," I said to Sam. His eyes widened as he understood. The ranch. We mounted up again, spurring our horses to a gallop. The 8 miles back to the ranch had never felt longer. My mind conjured terrible images. Silas waiting. Naomi walking into a trap. The cabin burning like Emma's shop. Please, I prayed to any God listening. Please let her be safe. We crested the final hill and I saw the cabin, still standing. No smoke. But there were 3 horses tied outside. Horses I didn't recognize. "Around back," Sam whispered. "Quiet." We dismounted a 1/4 mile away and approached on foot using the trees for cover. As we got closer, I heard voices. Male voices. And Naomi's voice high and frightened. I crept to the window and looked inside. 3 men I'd never seen before had Naomi backed against the far wall. She held a kitchen knife, her hand shaking her bad leg, clearly paining her from standing so long. The men were armed, but hadn't drawn their weapons yet. "Just come with us peaceful," like one of them said. "Mr. Turner wants to talk to you, that's all." "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Ma'am, we can do this easy or hard. Your choice." "Where's Silas?" I couldn't see him, but he had to be here. Then I heard his voice from deeper in the cabin. "Still playing the devoted wife, I see. How touching, though we both know this marriage is a sham." Silas stepped into view. He looked different than the last time I'd seen him. Thinner, harder. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by rough trail clothes. His face was unshaven, his eyes slightly wild. This was a man who'd lost everything and had nothing left to lose, the most dangerous kind. "What do you want, Silas?" Naomi's voice was steadier than her hands. "Justice, compensation, revenge, take your pick." He moved closer to her, and I saw my wife press harder against the wall. "You cost me everything. You and that husband of yours, my businesses, my reputation, my future, all gone because you two decided to play house. You cost yourself everything, through your own greed and cruelty. Perspective." He smiled, but it was the smile of a wolf. "See, I've had weeks to think about this. About what I lost and how to get even. I can't get my empire back. But I can make sure you and Jake suffer like I've suffered. So what, you're going to kill me, that will just prove everyone right about you." "Kill you? No, that's too quick, too merciful." His smile widened. "I'm going to take you, far away where Jake will never find you. Maybe Mexico, maybe farther. And every day for the rest of his miserable life, he'll wonder where you are. If you're alive. If you're suffering. He'll torture himself far more effectively than I ever could." I'd heard enough. I signaled to Sam, who nodded. We'd done this before in the old days. We knew how to move together. I kicked in the front door, rifle raised. Sam came through the back simultaneously. The 3 hired men spun toward us, hands moving to their weapons. "Don't," I said, my voice cold as winter. "My friend and I are very good shots. You'll be dead before you clear leather." The men froze, but Silas just laughed. "Jake Stedman, right on cue. You're predictable, I'll give you that. Let her go, Silas. This is between you and me." "No, it's not. It stopped being between us when you turned the whole town against me, when you exposed me as a fraud, when you took everything from me." His voice rose to a shout. "You want her? Come get her." He grabbed Naomi, pulling her in front of him like a shield. The knife she'd been holding clattered to the floor. His arm wrapped around her throat, and I saw a small blade in his other hand pressed against her side. "Drop the rifles, both of you, or I open her up right here." Sam and I exchanged glances. We both knew what would happen if we dropped our weapons. We'd all die. But if we didn't, Naomi might die right now. "Do it." Silas pressed the blade harder. Naomi gasped in pain, and I saw a red stain beginning to bloom on her dress. All right, all right. I slowly lowered my rifle, setting it on the floor. Sam did the same. Good. Now kick them away. We did. The 3 hired men immediately scrambled to grab the weapons. Silas smiled. Much better. Now we can have a civilized conversation about how this is going to work. You're going to sign over your ranch deed to me as compensation for my losses. Then I'm taking your wife and you're never going to see her again. I'll sign whatever you want. Just let her go. You think I'm stupid? The moment I let her go, you'll fight. You'll run to the marshal. You'll cause problems. He shook his head. No, she comes with me. Insurance that you'll behave. Naomi's eyes met mine. I saw fear there, but also something else. Determination. She was planning something, and she needed me to be ready. Jake, she said quietly, remember what you told me about not giving up, about fighting for what matters. Naomi, don't. I love you. Whatever happens, remember that. Then she moved. It was so fast, I almost missed it. She dropped her weight suddenly, making herself dead weight in Silas's arms. He stumbled, trying to hold her. In that moment of imbalance, she drove her elbow backward into his ribs with all her strength. Silas gasped, and his grip loosened. Naomi fell to the floor and rolled away, her bad leg screaming, but her mind clear. I dove for the knife she'd dropped earlier. Sam went for one of the hired men. Chaos erupted. I came up with the kitchen knife just as Silas raised his blade to stab at Naomi. I threw myself between them, and the blade meant for her sank into my shoulder instead. White-hot pain exploded through me, but I ignored it. I grabbed Silas's wrist and twisted hard. Bones cracked. He screamed and dropped the knife. Behind me, Sam was wrestling with 2 of the hired men. The 3rd had run out the door. Coward. Silas tried to punch me with his good hand, but I was running on pure adrenaline now. I hit him in the face, feeling his nose break under my fist. He went down hard. Jake! Naomi screamed. I turned to see one of the hired men had broken free from Sam and drawn a pistol. It was aimed at my chest. Time seemed to slow. I could see his finger tightening on the trigger. Then the window exploded inward, and the man dropped a red stain spreading across his chest. Through the broken window, I saw Marshal Henry Carter and his deputies' rifles still smoking. The 2nd hired man immediately put his hands up, surrendering. It was over. Henry and his men flooded into the cabin. They pulled the wounded hired man outside, arrested the one who'd surrendered, and put Silas in irons. The whole time, Silas was screaming threats and promises of revenge, but his voice got fainter as they dragged him away. Then Naomi was in my arms, both of us shaking, both of us bleeding, but alive. So blessedly alive. You're hurt, she said, her hands fluttering over the knife wound in my shoulder. You're hurt too. The blade had cut her side, not deep but enough to be dangerous. We're a matched set. Her laugh was slightly hysterical. Sam appeared with strips of cloth. Let's patch you both up before you bleed all over this nice cabin. Emma arrived minutes later, summoned by one of the deputies. She took over the medical care with brisk efficiency, cleaning wounds and applying bandages while scolding us both for being reckless. You could have been killed, she said for the 3rd time. But we weren't, Naomi replied. We're still here, together. And that was what mattered. Not the blood, or the pain, or the fear. Just that we'd survived, that we'd fought together and won. Henry returned an hour later with news. The fire in town had been arson set by the 3rd hired man as a distraction, but the bucket brigade had contained it before it spread beyond Emma's shop. The building could be rebuilt. As for Silas Turner, he was headed to territorial prison, attempted murder, kidnapping, arson. He'd be lucky to see freedom again before he was an old man. It's finally over, Henry said. He can't hurt you anymore, but it wasn't quite over, not yet. The next morning, Henry's deputies tracked down the 3rd hired man who'd fled during the confrontation. They found him trying to board a train to Montana. Within an hour of interrogation, he broke completely. Yes, Silas had been planning this for weeks. Yes, he'd set the fire as a diversion. And yes, he'd been holding Will Henderson's 8-year-old son Tommy in an abandoned mining shack near Dead Horse Canyon. The boy was found that same afternoon cold and hungry, but unharmed. When Will Henderson was reunited with his son, he collapsed to his knees and wept. The whole town watched, and more than a few joined him in tears. The territorial prosecutor, a formidable woman named Margaret Sullivan, arrived from Cheyenne 3 days later. The coincidence of her name wasn't lost on me. She interviewed every witness, examined every piece of evidence, and built a case so ironclad that even Silas's expensive lawyers couldn't find a crack. The trial lasted 3 days. I testified about the debt scheme. Naomi testified about the kidnapping attempt. Will Henderson, with his son sitting safely in the front row, testified about the extortion and child abduction with a quiet fury that made the jury sit up straighter. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, including attempted murder, kidnapping, arson, and extortion, the courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Morrison had to gavel for order. Silas Turner was sentenced to 20 years in territorial prison. As the marshals led him away in chains, he looked back at me one last time. The hatred in his eyes was still there, burning as hot as ever. But beneath it, I saw something else. Defeat. He knew he'd lost everything, and unlike us, he had nothing left to rebuild. A week after the trial, Emma's dress shop reopened. The entire community had rallied, rebuilding it in just 10 days. The new building was actually better than the old one, with bigger windows and a separate classroom space for Naomi's herb classes. On opening day, 30 women showed up for Naomi's first official healing workshop. Emma had to move chairs from the church to fit everyone. As I watched my wife teach, her face glowing with purpose and pride, I realized something. We hadn't just survived. We'd built something. Together. That night, as Naomi and I lay in bed, both of us bandaged and sore but alive, I held her close and thought about everything we'd been through, from that first day when Victor abandoned her in the snow to tonight's terrifying confrontation. All of it had led to this moment, to us together, safe. "What are you thinking?" Naomi asked sleepily. "That I'm grateful for all of it, even the bad parts, because they brought me you." She tilted her head to look at me. "Even the part where you got stabbed, even that. Though let's not make a habit of it." She laughed, then winced. "Laughing hurts." "Then don't laugh, just rest." "I can't rest. I'm too happy." She snuggled closer. "We're free, Jake. Really free. No debts, no threats. Just us and our life." She was right. For the first time since Margaret's death, I could look to the future without grief or fear clouding it. The future was bright, full of possibility, full of love. "Marry me," I said suddenly. She blinked. "We're already married." "I know. But we married for the wrong reasons, for protection and survival. I want to marry you again, for the right reasons, because I love you and want to spend my life with you, because you're my partner and my best friend, and the person I want beside me for all the years to come." Tears filled her eyes. "You romantic fool." "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes. It was always a yes." We renewed our vows 3 weeks later in June, when Naomi's garden was in full bloom. Emma made her a new dress, white with blue flowers embroidered at the hem. Sam stood as my best man again. Running Deer came with a dozen Shoshone elders to witness and bless the union. This time, when Henry asked if I took this woman to be my wife, my answer came from the heart. Not just duty. I do, with everything I am. And when Naomi said the same, I knew she meant it just as deeply. The kiss we shared afterward was nothing like our first wedding kiss. This one was full of promise and passion, and the absolute certainty that we belonged together. The whole town celebrated with us, even Will Henderson, who played fiddle for the dancing. Sam got cheerfully drunk and told embarrassing stories about me. Emma cried happy tears. and Running Deer pulled me aside to say he was proud to call me grandson. As the sun set and the party continued, I found myself standing with Naomi on the edge of the celebration, looking at our cabin in the distance. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "The future, what we'll build together." I turned to her. "I was thinking about children. Would you want that?" Her face lit up. "Yes, several if we're blessed. And that school you mentioned, the one Margaret wanted to build. We could do it together, teach reading and writing and healing, make Iron Creek a place where knowledge grows along with crops. And when we're old," I pulled her close. "What then? Then we'll sit on our porch and watch our grandchildren play. And we'll tell them stories about the winter of 1883 when a stubborn rancher saved a broken woman and she saved him right back." I kissed her forehead. "You were never broken, just bent. And stronger for it. And you were never stubborn, just determined." "I was absolutely stubborn," she laughed. "Fine. You were stubborn. But you were my stubborn man, my husband, my home." Oh, we stood there as darkness fell and stars emerged, holding each other while our friends and family celebrated around us. The future stretched ahead, full of possibility. We'd face it together, through hard winters and bountiful summers, through joy and sorrow, through everything life could throw at us. Because that's what partners do, they stand together against the storm. 20 years later, I would stand in that same spot with silver threading through my dark hair. Naomi would be beside me, her limp more pronounced with age, but her spirit fierce as the day I met her. Our 5 children had grown into remarkable adults. Margaret, our eldest at 19, taught reading and mathematics at the school we'd built on the hill. The school bore 2 names carved above its door, the Margaret Stedman and White Dove Memorial School for All Nations. White Dove had been Naomi's mother's name. Our second daughter, Emma, named for the woman who'd championed us, ran the expanded herb business with her mother. Together, they'd written a book on frontier medicine that doctors across 3 territories now used. Our son Thomas, named for the man I'd been before Naomi saved me, worked the ranch at my side. At 17, he already understood cattle better than I had at 30. The twins, Sarah and Running Deer, were 15 and inseparable. Sarah had her namesake's red hair and gentle spirit. Running Deer, named for his great-grandfather, had inherited his ancestors' gift for tracking and reading the land. On warm evenings, Naomi and I would sit on our expanded porch and watch our grandchildren play. Yes, grandchildren. Margaret had married a school teacher from Cheyenne, and they'd blessed us with 2 beautiful babies. The garden Naomi had planted that first spring now covered 2 acres. The medicinal herb business she'd started in Emma's dress shop had become a thriving enterprise, supplying healers and doctors across Wyoming, Montana, and Colorado. The ranch had grown from 800 acres to 2,000, not through conquest or greed, but through hard work and fair dealing. We'd bought out 3 neighboring spreads, whose owners retired, and we employed 12 people year-round. 6 of them were Shoshone from Running Deer's tribe. The other 6 were white Mexican and 1 Chinese immigrant family. Iron Creek itself had transformed. What had been a rough frontier town of 200 was now a proper community of nearly 1,000. The school taught 80 children. The church held services in 3 languages. And on the site where Silas Turner's saloon once stood, there was now a lending library that Emma Carter ran until her death in 1899. "Do you ever regret it?" Naomi asked me one evening in the summer of 1904, her hand in mine, as it had been for 20 years. "That first winter, the way we started." I thought about it, about the scared, abandoned woman standing in the snow, about the broken man who'd given up on living, about how 2 people who should never have worked somehow became everything to each other. "Not for a single moment," I said. "Every hard step, every fight, every moment of doubt, it all led us here, to this porch, to these children, to this life." She smiled that same smile that had first broken through my grief all those years ago. The smile that still made my heart skip. Then it was worth it. All of it. Every second, I agreed. And it was. Some promises take time to keep. Some journeys take you through darkness to reach the light. But in the end, the struggle makes the destination sweeter. Margaret made me promise I'd keep living. I kept that promise by finding Naomi. Naomi's mother made her promise she'd never let them make her small. She kept that promise by becoming a healer who helped hundreds. We made promises to each other on a cold December night in 1883. We kept those promises every single day for the rest of our lives. This was my destination, our destination, and it was perfect, man. The end.